Have you ever just stopped and wondered why some ideas, no matter how wild they seem, can get such a powerful hold on people? It's really not about how smart someone is. It's all about how our minds are wired. So let's dive in and explore the hidden psychological forces that actually shape our most deeply held beliefs.
So yeah, why is it so easy for us to believe things that seem to fly in the face of logic? Well, the answer isn't simple, but it's buried deep inside our own psychology in a few key areas that we're about to unpack together.
All right, first up, let's talk about identity. This is absolutely crucial. See, we tend to think of our beliefs as just ideas we have, but for a lot of people, beliefs aren't just what they think. They're a huge part of who they are.
Okay, think about your self-esteem like this. We've all got a self-concept. That's who we think we are right now. And we've also got a self-ideal. That's the person we really want to be. Now, when there's a big gap between those two, our self-esteem can really take a hit. And to try and close that gap, some of us might grab on to these big, powerful external beliefs to feel a stronger sense of purpose and self-worth. Let's take an example. Imagine a woman whose core belief is that the planet Jupiter is actually a god. Now, for her, that's not just some random idea. It is the very foundation of her identity. It's a solid, comforting truth in her world. But it also makes her incredibly vulnerable to anyone who knows how to manipulate that belief.
So, what happens when you challenge that core belief with cold, hard facts? Well, the ego goes into total lockdown mode. It throws up these powerful defenses. First comes anger. How dare you question me? Then comes denial. Nope, that's not true. I don't see any problem. And finally, you get rationalization. Well, okay, maybe that one thing didn't work, but it's only because this other good thing happened instead.
Now let's shift gears to our second vulnerability, our emotional programming. The patterns for how we see comfort and safety as adults, a lot of that gets set in stone when we're very, very young.
There's something called attachment theory that explains this perfectly. Basically, our first relationships with our parents or caregivers create this emotional blueprint. So, for example, someone with what's called an anxious preoccupied style might have this deep-seated fear of rejection and a real craving for security. And that makes them especially vulnerable to gurus or astrologers who promise exactly that: certainty and unconditional comfort.
And that brings us right to our third vulnerability. Our brains are amazing, right? But they're also kind of lazy. To save energy, they take these mental shortcuts. And these shortcuts, or cognitive biases, can sometimes lead us way off track. Let's look at a classic one, the self-fulfilling prophecy. This is when a belief you hold is so strong that it actually changes your behavior, which in turn makes the belief come true. Let me show you what I mean. Here's how that cycle plays out. Imagine a man is told some ritual is going to save his marriage. His belief in that ritual creates an expectation that things will get better. This influences his behavior. Maybe he becomes a little kinder, more attentive to his wife. And the result, the relationship actually improves. But here's the kicker. He doesn't credit his new, better behavior. Nope, he credits the ritual. And that just reinforces his original belief. He completely misses the real reason things got better. Then you've got its simpler cousin, wishful thinking. This is just that raw, powerful desire for something to be true, so you believe it, no matter what the evidence says. It's an incredibly strong force that can get us to accept some pretty wild claims with almost zero proof. So we've got these vulnerabilities, right? In our identity, our emotions, and our basic thinking patterns. Now, let's look at how these weaknesses are systematically exploited by people peddling pseudoscience. The source material we're looking at really puts it bluntly. For a lot of these folks, our fear, our uncertainty, and our desire for easy answers, that is their business model. And they do it through a careful process of indoctrination. Let's go back to our woman who believes Jupiter is a god. An astrologer doesn't tell her she's wrong. No, he builds on it. He starts small, yes, and Jupiter's influence is positive. Then the next step, and its energy can be channeled. And then the final pitch? And this expensive ring will channel that energy and bring you wealth. See? Each step feels like a tiny, logical leap from what she already believes. Another really common tactic is what's called the God of the Gaps fallacy. This is where a manipulator points to something science can't totally explain yet, like, say, the deepest mysteries of quantum physics. And they use that little gap in our knowledge as proof for their own supernatural claim. They're literally using what we don't know to validate what they claim to know. So what's their motivation? Why do they do it? Well, according to our source material, it usually comes down to one of three things.
1. Some are genuinely deluded. They actually believe their own hype. 2. For others, it's just business. It's a super easy way to make money. And 3. For some, it's all about power. It feeds a deep need to be seen as special, as an authority who knows all the answers. Okay, after hearing about all these vulnerabilities and manipulations, it's really easy to feel a little cynical. I get it. But the solution isn't to just shut down and distrust everything. It's to wake up to how our own minds actually work. The absolute best defense against all of this isn't cynicism. It's self-awareness. It's about understanding your own emotional needs, recognizing when your identity gets tangled up in a belief, and just being aware of your brain's sneaky little shortcuts. That is your shield. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know a little more about the hidden forces that shape what we believe, what is one belief, big or small, that you're willing to take a closer look at with fresh eyes today?